Welcome to our Friday afternoon broadcast. Today's very exciting because it's Denzel's birthday, which I assume is why he's all dressed up today.
I had a speech today, but yeah, we could
Oh,
go with
that's
that
right.
too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had my last final for motivational speaking class. That went well. I'll post it on my channel later.
Well, everybody comment happy birthday and also congratulations on your speech. But yeah, today we're talking about how to spot the SP type. So last week we did NFs and that was super fun. And this week we're going to talk about sensing perceiving types.
So, David Kiersey named the SP types the explorers, the adventurers, the artisans, around that uh, spectrum, and he called them these things because they all have the two same functions of extroverted sensing and introverted intuition. I guess one consistent thing that I've seen with them is that they really do love to just soak in the moment. So this is the ISFP, ESFP, ISTP, and ESTP. And because of that extroverted sensing, whether it's their dominant for the ESTP and ESFP or their auxiliary for the ISFP and ISTP, they're really good at just like being in the moment, and they're very aesthetically driven. They notice a lot of like colors. They're all fashionable from what I've seen. Yeah,
Well,
I've
okay.
from what I've seen, yeah, they just like
Sure.
seem, or at least better than I like. My SE is tertiary,
Right.
and so they
And
they
mine's
they
non
have
existent. So
so they have a better taste than I do. They're actually the ones that help me a lot of times with what I have to wear. But
same.
yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think they like you hit the nail on the head with aesthetic awareness. They have this like very, very intense um presence. Like they're very grounded in their environments. They're always kind
Mhm.
of like experiencing where they are. So you get this a little bit with the SJs too, but with the SPs, it's less subjective because they're directly engaging with it because it's extroverted sensing as opposed to introverted. So
Yeah,
whereas introverted sensing kind of pulls in like impressions and it analyzes them and kind of adds to them almost internally, extroverted sensing I would say is the most objective function
yeah,
because
me
it's
too.
actually in the moment, like engaging with what's in front of it. Um, and all of the SPs share this function. So they all have extroverted sensing, either as their dominant or auxiliary function. So you're going to have this presence from them that's very engaged usually, or if they're introverted, they might not seem as engaged, but they're always noticing. Like ISTPs and
Yeah,
ISTs, they just notice everything.
yeah,
So you have that very keen sense of observation, of awareness. With dominant SC users, I find just that very like present focus, like wide eyes, like ready to react to anything at any moment, is kind of the first thing that jumps out to me about dominant SE users.
I heard another joke like the ESTP. I think it was one of those like blogs or on the Tumblrs and everything, like observing the types as a stranger. And when they were making fun, like they said that when they were observing the ESTP, they could barely observe the ESTP without feeling like they were being observed back. And I thought that was very interesting because it's like, you're trying to spy on someone, but they're spying on you because they notice all of these things. And the
Yeah,
ISTP is the same way, like catches everything. So that's another consistency that you'll find with this type. Like they do not miss things. They are always like scanning, watching, even the introverted ones. Um, yeah, and that's due to their SE.
that's extroverted sensing. Like he's just constantly picking up on things that other people are almost more inclined to just naturally filter out because we all filter out perceptions to
Hmm.
in some way, right? But with
Yeah,
extroverted sensing, it's very much objective about what it's taking in. It kind of takes in the whole picture of what's around it and what's happening. So you get those observations that are just so spot on that other people are just missing, and it
yeah,
gives them that just like very I don't want to say focus because their attention can actually be very scattered, but it's
yeah.
very there, like it's very present. Do you want to go into ISFP since we've already been kind of touching on that?
Sure, we can start with that.
I think they're the hardest one personally to spot of the SP type. So it's also a challenge. Well, that and ISTPs.
What I said about the ISFP, have the curiosity of an ISTP with the playfulness of an ESFP. Think of 11 from Stranger Things. They have like a very like quiet nature, and they can seem like INFJ. Like I think that a lot of
Yes.
people who think that they're INFJ are actually ISFP, and that's because INFJs also have that NISE like axis within them, so it
Mhm.
makes them seem like Zen-like and everything. But the ISFP has that type of like they give off a very similar energy, and it's like very like reserved, artistic, relaxing, soothing, comforting, and they're very in tune with themselves. They don't usually like they're literally all about authenticity and like self-expression. I also think of like Michael Jackson. I even believe that Jackie Chan and Mulan, I mentioned her before, our ISFP, and the consistency that I just see between all of these types is like they have like a reserved kind of nature that's just like in the moment, gentle spirited,
Mhm.
but they also have a flip where like TE is their last function, and from Stranger Things and even from Jackie Chan, even from Mulan, Michael Jackson, like once they get into that SETE, then they can really like exert themselves. So a lot of people tend to like underestimate them, like, oh, you're just a delicate flower type or whatever. And it's because they're not really like pushing, that dominance. But once they finally do exert it, like 11 from Stranger Things, not to like spoil it for those of you who haven't seen it, she has a lot of power behind her. And Jackie Chan has a lot of power behind him. He might not want to use it, but if he has to, he will. And I think that that's Mulan has a lot of power behind her. Michael Jackson puts a lot into his performance, or put a lot into his performances. So I think that that's something like it's kind of like a secret weapon that they have that don't really underestimate. Like just because I'm meek doesn't mean that I'm weak.
The reasons it's so difficult to identify them is because you kind of have to get to know them well until you see that like silly, like fun loving side of them. Because like you said, they present as like very stoic and very
Yeah.
focused and very serious. And then it's always kind of a surprise once you get to know them well and you're like, oh, they have this like a lot of them are like a wild side. Like they can be
Yeah.
great, like just very intense characters, but they don't present that way at first. So I think
Hmm.
a lot of the time they get mistaken for like SJs, NJs.
Especially INTJ too. Same
And
functions.
I,
I've
yeah,
seen that.
yeah, because they present that serious demeanor, right? And then you get to know them a
Hmm.
little better, and you're like, oh, you're actually a lot more similar to ESFPs than any other type. But you don't present that way at first. So it's a really interesting
Hmm.
combination of functions, and it's one that I think honestly might be one of the hardest ones to spot of all the 16 types. I think
Hmm.
ISFPs can be very tricky. Same with, and maybe this will segue us into the next one, but ISTPs, I constantly see being mistaken for NTs of some sort.
Yeah.
Because we really underestimate with this type how analytical the ISTP is.
Hmm.
And I think we give the word like analysis and intellectualism and, like we hand all of that over to NT types. But
Yeah.
ISTPs are, in my opinion, one of the most intellectual types of all of the types.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
they're often, like very often getting mistaken for NTs. And they have like ISFPs, they don't present instantly with that like kind of like silly, fun-loving nature that we associate
Hmm.
with SPs. They tend to present as more reserved, more serious, depending what context you're meeting them in, obviously.
Yeah.
And again, it's not until you get to know them that you learn that they also have this like fun-loving, silly side. But again, that's not how they initially present. So I think it's hard to spot an ISTP right off the bat, the same way it's hard to spot an ISFP,
Hmm.
because they present as more serious than they actually are once you get to know them.
Like this isn't like definitive, but the ISFP is known as the most intuitive of the sensors, due to like their NI being tertiary, but then also their self-expression. Like they marry that together. So like it's not necessary. Like I said, it's not like a definitive type of thing, but that's what they commonly like. They're able to usually keep up with like intuitive conversation, and all of that. And then I would say the ISTP is like right there with them. That's why they can get like, confused for NTs a lot of times because they do like to engage in that type of conversation and everything, but they just prefer SE still over their NI. So like the
Mm-hmm.
ISFP,
Yep.
although they get really in tune with their NI, and they have all these like they have a rich inner world of insights and patterns and abstraction and everything, because they prefer using SE, then they will try and express themselves through SE, which kind of like makes them the sensor in that sense. But they still have that intuitive type of like mindset to them, or that intuitive type of inner world within them. And I think that's the same for the ISTP as well. So they can be mistaken for intuitives, but in the way they express themselves and what they prefer to use in order to express that intuition, they would be classified as sensors.
The SPs versus the NPs have a more grounded presence to them because of NI. So I always say, like, get them brainstorming if you want to see how these types are different, because an INFP or an INTP, they have more of a scattered thought process because they have that secondary extroverted intuition, which goes off on tangents, and it kind of extrapolates upon extrapolations, and it'll kind of go off forever. Whereas if you get an SE-NI user brainstorming, they're more likely to streamline it a bit more because NI likes to kind of stay on track, and they'll have a more grounded approach to the ideas they're presenting. So it's not going to be this like ideas jumping on top of ideas, jumping on top of ideas. It's going to be like, okay, here's some ideas we have, and they can like keep it on track and kind of keep it focused on and they're able to pick out like which ideas are the best ideas because they have NI kind of filtering through that. So those types get mistaken for each other a lot as well. I think INFP, ISFP, INTP, ISTP, but the sensors just have a more grounded presence to them because the SE is so grounded in reality and in the here and now. And that's a really big tell, but it's one that I think people don't pick up on very much because they don't think about how ISFPs and ISTPs have that tertiary introverted intuition. And, you know, we don't place enough weight, in my opinion, on tertiary functions when we're typing. But in this case, this is a really good example of how it can mess you up.
Oh, just going back to the compound thing, for the ISTP, I put the pensive and focused nature of the INTJ, which I think that many ISTPs get mistaken for INTJs, but with the flexibility and grounding, as you said, of an ESTP. I think identifying ESTPs, to me, it's actually, once again, like, it's kind of easy just because, just personally speaking, I feel like it's easy to just like, they bring like a natural kind of like confidence and like swag to them.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And they may seem introverted a lot of times because of like how like cool, reserved, and relaxed that they can be, but you can tell like their focus is on the external world, like whether it has to be with like their fashion or how they're being presented, or how like let's just go and do it type of like mindset that they have. And they really are just like they just come with like a lot of confidence. I mean, some of them can be conceited, but there's a difference between like being conceited and like just being like really confident and exuding that type of like, you know. And I think that has to do with that SETIFE combo in the top three functions. Like the SE allows them to be like in the moment, gives them a good sense of like, you know, style. Then the TI gives them like an ability to like, you know, think rationally. And then FE allows them to like have even though it's tertiary, it still gives them like a keen sense on like how to like interact with other people. So when you have all of that like married together, then you have a really relaxed kind of person.
And this is an opinion, but the way that their cognitive function stacking works is just kind of well suited for interaction with the world. Like, you know, SC is so engaged with its environment, and then TI, like you said, is very good at just like, you know, parsing through things rationally. And then, so I almost think it's not even an overconfidence. I think it's just that they tend to be very comfortable in their own skin because, and this doesn't apply to all of them, but like overall, they're just, you get that sense that they're very kind of cool, collected, confident, like comfortable, all the C words with who they are, because I think who they are just relates in a very effortless way to a lot of different situations. Like I think the skill set that they have for navigating their external environment is one that is just well suited to doing that. So I would say they come across as very confident a lot of the time, but I don't think it's necessarily like cockiness. It's not that they're you know, going too far with things. I think that's just...
It can be, but it's not often.
But it can be with any type, right?
Exactly, yeah.
An SE dominant type, I think you just have like one of their skills is just being able to pick up on things quickly as well, right?
Yeah.
So you throw an SC Dom into any situation and they're going to be engaged with it quickly. They're going to be trying to figure things out as quickly as they can. And their skill set is inclined to do that. So I feel like there's a natural sense of confidence that tends to come along with both SE dominant types, ESTPs and ESFPs. But it's more just the manner of how they're interacting with the world than it is like an ego-based confidence.
For them, I put the unifying leadership of an ENFJ with the logical detachment of an ISTP. If we were to take it back, like I think of like the Power Rangers, I've seen the Red Ranger leader has always been like the ESTP. Even the recent movie, I've seen him as like ESTP, and he was the one to like, unify and lead the group. But you could still see like he had like a certain type of like detachment, like a logical detachment from everyone, that a feeler would not really have. And I also see them as well as ESFPs as the types to like, this just makes sense. Like even thinking of like Donald Trump, who I believe is ESTP, like he just looks at things. He just looks at things, and even if it's not always right, ESTPs with the confidence, like they just have a knack, oftentimes, especially if they're healthy, to just look at things. And while especially intuitives are like overthinking stuff, the ESTP and the ESFP are usually able to look at things and be like, this is just what it is. And I think that that's how they tend to come about. Like, just like I said with Donald Trump, like he just thinks in a way like, why haven't any of the other presidents ever done this? Like, exactly. It's so simple. Yeah. And they are just very good at like simplifying things.
Yeah, that's the trait of, both ESTPs especially because they have the logical secondary function, right? And ESFPs are very much that way, though they do have a different auxiliary function, of course. So they don't have that detachment. They have that emotional investment in whatever they're doing and whatever they're perceiving. But that's definitely just kind of like a funny trait. Like I actually think in a lot of ways it would be frustrating to be an SE Dom because you're seeing things so clearly and everyone else is, it would just seem like everyone else is overcomplicating things all of the time. The ESTP just kind of has that like cool as a cucumber presence. Like they're just very, they have that sense of detachment, even though they can be like gregarious and engaged and fun. You can tell that it's not necessarily like an emotional reaction to what's going on around them on a personal level. Whereas with ESFPs, you do get that emotional reaction to most things. And it's usually quite apparent. Not that they necessarily wear their hearts on their sleeves, but they have no problem like expressing affection and emotion. And it's very genuine.
For the ESFP, the last one that I put was the drive of an ENTJ with the authenticity of an ISFP. And they have the same functions as the ENTJ, especially they have a really good grip on SE and TE. So what I've seen with ESFPs, especially my roommate Tay, is if he wants something, he will go and get it. Like if he needs a ride or if he needs money, whatever it is, he is not afraid to go after it. Like he will just act. And I think that it's very similar to how the ENTJs tend to operate. Like they tend to just go after whatever they need to do. But identifying ESFPs, they're usually like the ones who can literally make anything fun. Like if you have an ESFP at your job, they're the ones who's like always like laughing and just like having a good time usually. And they make everybody else laugh and enjoy the job. And they're just very like free spirited. Also tend to be like very good with using their body. So Bruno Mars is a great dancer. I saw I think That's What I Like music video, which is like all dancing for like the whole 4 minutes. And if you guys haven't seen it, you guys should go check it out. I was like, this is insane. And he just knows how to control a stage. And ESFPs are usually known as like the performer. A lot of them are also comedians oftentimes. So like your class clown is probably an ESFP. And really the thing that just comes to mind is like free spirited and fun when I think about ESFP. Like they just literally like to have a good time and express themselves in an authentic manner.
I would say ESFPs are kind of like the ultimate people of the MBTI. You also have ESFJs who are like very, very focused on people, but it's a more concentrated energy. Like it's more organized, whereas the ESFP has this kind of like free flowing energy that's directed at people. And it's just a fun kind of uplifting thing to be around. They're so fun. And they bring people together really well.
They do.
like if you have one in a workplace or in like any sort of team environment, they're very quick to get everyone on the same page, and they're really, really good at it.
Yeah.
And they're good at doing that both with groups and with individual people, like checking in on people and going, hey, you seem off about this. In a lot of ways, they kind of, it almost mimics FE, but it's coming from a different place. But they have that ability, right, to just kind of identify when things aren't working for people and then finding a way to get everyone on the same page. It's easy to confuse that with FE, but then when you watch them in the rest of their lives, they just have that like free-spirited, like don't want to be pegged down. So those classic like SP traits come out in other ways. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up for today. Denzel's going to go have some birthday cake.
Hopefully. I don't know what they
It's his birthday. Wish him happy birthday in the comments. Sorry for calling you out.
I actually forgot. But y'all have a great rest of your day and weekend.
Have a good weekend, guys, and we'll see you next Friday.
I'm David Bowder, CEO of SPASIGMA. Every day, each of us is surrounded by a great diversity of people, and indeed, personalities. Some people we find it very easy to relate to. Others, not so much so. Our program exists to help you make sense of your own personality, as well as the diverse personalities around you, to help you improve both your personal and professional lives. Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." We'll teach you to understand how to reach the diverse personalities around you, to communicate with them in a way that integrates who you are with who they are. So enough talk about all this. Welcome to SPASIGMA's Personality Quotient PQ program. Enjoy the journey.